From the mid-18th to the early 20th century, the trajectory of women's rights in Britain was marked by a complex interplay of social, political, and economic factors. This period saw gradual but significant changes driven by persistent advocacy and shifting societal attitudes. In the mid-18th century, women's roles were largely defined by domesticity and subordination. The prevailing norms emphasized their duties as wives and mothers, and legal and educational rights were severely limited. Women could not vote, hold public office, or access higher education. Their property rights were also restricted, and upon marriage, women typically lost control of their assets to their husbands. Despite these constraints, early signs of change began to emerge. Figures such as Mary Wollstonecraft began challenging the status quo. Her seminal work, A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, 1792, argued for women's education and equality. Wollstonecraft's ideas, while groundbreaking, faced resistance and were not immediately embraced by mainstream society. The 19th century was a period of gradual reform and heightened activism. The first significant legal change came with the Married Women's Property Act of 1870, which allowed married women to retain control over their own earnings and property. This was a critical step towards financial independence for women. But it did not yet address all aspects of marital property rights. The 1870s and 1880s also saw the rise of the women's suffrage movement. Activists like Millicent Fawcett and the National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies, NUWSS, advocated for women's right to vote through peaceful means and political lobbying. This period also saw the formation of the Women's Social and Political Union, WSPU, in 1903, led by Emmeline Pankhurst and her daughters. The WSPU employed more militant tactics, including protests, demonstrations, and acts of civil disobedience, to draw attention to their cause. During the 19th century, women's access to education began to improve. The establishment of women's colleges at Oxford and Cambridge in the late 19th century represented a significant advancement. Institutions like Girton College, founded in 1869, and Newnham College, founded in 1871, offered higher education opportunities for women, albeit still with limitations. In terms of employment, the Industrial Revolution had a dual effect on women's work. On one hand, it provided opportunities for women to work in factories and other new industries, but often under poor conditions and for lower wages compared to their male counterparts. The movement for better working conditions and fair wages became a critical part of the broader struggle for women's rights. By the early 20th century, women's rights activists had achieved some notable successes. The Representation of the People Act of 1918 was a landmark achievement, granting the vote to women over the age of 30 who met minimum property qualifications. This was a significant concession, reflecting both the pressure of suffragist movements and the contributions of women during World War I. The 1918 Act did not achieve full suffrage equality, but it set the stage for further progress. The Equal Franchise Act of 1928, passed shortly after the period in question, extended the vote to all women over the age of 21, thus achieving parity with men. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, the women's rights movement was deeply intertwined with other social and political movements. The fight for women's suffrage, for instance, was influenced by broader struggles for social reform, including labor rights and class equality. The campaigns for women's rights were also influenced by and contributed to the growing discourse on individual liberties and social justice. women's rights in Britain from 1745 to 1914 reflect a remarkable journey from exclusion and inequality to increased recognition and rights. The progress made during this period laid a crucial foundation for future advancements in gender equality. While significant barriers remained, the efforts of activists and reformers during this era were pivotal in shaping the trajectory of women's rights in Britain. As we reflect on this period, it becomes clear that the struggle for women's rights was not just about securing specific legal changes, but about challenging deep-seated social norms and reshaping the public understanding of gender roles and equality. The achievements of this era, while transformative, were just the beginning of a longer journey toward full gender equality, a journey that continues to evolve in the years that follow.